My name is Jevgenij Rusakov and you're watching TVP World, interview from Vilnius. NATO is often described as the strongest military alliance in the world, yet recent geopolitical shocks, internal disagreements and Russia's aggressive posture are increasingly testing its resilience. How vulnerable is the alliance today and where do its real weaknesses lie? We discuss this with Giedrimas Jeglinskas, Lithuanian MP and former NATO official. Giedrimas, glad to see you in our studio, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
Giedrimas, so I'd like to start with this very interesting news to my mind. So Germany recently conducted a simulation of a potential Russian attack on Europe and the results revealed, well, serious vulnerabilities on NATO's side. So what does this tell us about the alliance's current state of preparedness and how useful are such simulations?
I think the simulation apart, I think we need to be thinking about various scenarios of what can transpire in geopolitical realm, in military realm, and I think there are hundreds of courses of action, hundreds of assumptions that we make when running these simulations. So one simulation, again, it means that the certain assumptions have been made, certain certain course of actions were planned, and we get this result, which sort of sounds shocking. But again, this is just one simulation. We can run multiple and hundreds of them, and we'll get a different result. I think it's okay to do that, and many countries do that. NATO as an alliance does these simulations. But to me, really two lessons come out of this. First is that no matter what the geopolitical turbulence, no matter how many treaties we sign, memorandums of understanding, agreements we signed, I think there's no substitute to working together and increasing the diplomatic collaboration. I think, and that's what NATO's North Atlantic Council does. Every week, 2 or 3 times ambassadors meet and they talk, they discuss issues and challenges, and that's what's needed to fully understand how we're going to work together if the crisis comes. The second lesson from this is that there's really no substitute to military capability, a real military capability that you need to deter an adversary. And deterrence, by its nature, it's in the mind of a potential aggressor. So I think it does not, the simulation is one thing, but it really, I think we should be clear that we need to build the military capability that deters, that defends, and here Europeans have a long way to go. And I think we've had President Trump to truly motivate a lot of Europeans to finally invest in defense. But sure, it's we have a long way to go. But we need to stick to this path.
Do you think the results of such simulations should or should not be classified?
As it was declassified, it was an open sort of outcome. So I think there's a reason why. I think there's always a political connotation behind that. I think to when you publish these sort of results, I think it creates some sort of outpour of reactions within the publics, and I think also politically speaking, then perhaps people and decision makers in every NATO country perhaps are thinking, okay, well, if that's a scenario that we can end up with, what do we need to do? So I think it's less important what it would have be, what sort of assumptions would be going, and what sort of course of action would run in the scenario. What's more important is what sort of lessons we take to that. What steps do we take in strengthening ourselves? And that's, to me, that's really, we go back to the same square one, meaning you need to build a military capability that's relevant rather than that's technologically adaptive, that we're learning from Ukrainian battlefront lessons. So it's a lot to think about, but I think every country can run multiple of these simulations, and we can end up with different results. The question is what are we aiming for?
Regarding the aim of this simulation. So one of the key objectives in that simulation from Russia's side was to split NATO. And this scenario proved alarmingly realistic. So how serious is the real risk of NATO fragmenting from within in today's geopolitical environment?
Well, I think, despite the kind of social media, the rhetoric that's coming through various political levels on this side of the Atlantic and in the Americas, I think we're very clearly see, and I agree here with the Secretary General Rutte. I agree with some military commanders who've been very clear that NATO is united in terms of deterring the threats, in terms of how we potentially respond to potential escalation, in terms of how we build capabilities that there's the so-called DDA concept, defense and deterrence in the Euro-Atlantic. This is working. The military planners are planning for that. America is with us, and I think, to be honest, I think we need America. By the way, despite some European leaders kind of playing the games here, I think we haven't seen any fracture in American participation in the NATO structure. So I would say, sure, politically, allies have always disagreed on something. There's 32 of them. There's 32 different national interests. So we've, in the past, we've seen when the NATO was much smaller, we've seen the Suez Canal crisis. We see the French leaving the alliance for a bit. I think the end of the Cold War was a real test for the alliances. Are we even relevant? The question was. I think as the alliance expanded again, it creates a lot of tension. Iraq War in 2003 really has brought a lot of tension there among the allies, and we're constantly sort of bickering and arguing in the North Atlantic Council. But at the end of the day, we come out stronger as the alliance. And I think now, with Finland and Sweden joining as some of the last joiners of the alliance, we have 32 nations. We're much stronger. We're investing a lot more. Again, thanks to President Trump. We have to be recognizing that, and I think at the end of the day we're a much stronger alliance, and I think it's a political will that in each country needs to be really delivering those capabilities. There's no substitute for investing in your own military capability, and I think every country is doing that.
When it comes to relations with Russia, Europe seems divided. What does this lack of consensus say about Europe's strategic unity?
Well, I think Europe, we've always been divided as European continent. Although we kind of played this game for the past 30, 35 years, that the European Union has been growing and expanding and enlarging, kind of enveloping many new members. But at the end of the day, I think we're even talk about the Euro project. The euro is a monetary policy, but it has no fiscal constraints. It's a European project, but it's very problematic. Capital markets are not working in Europe as they should be working. We have a huge population. We have a combined total economy that's pretty large, but at the end of the day, lack of technological investments are happening. We're a pretty dire state when you think about the future. And in a current sort of global game of power, Europe does not have a singular voice. There's no, when we talk, in February 2022, when the war restored, the full-scale invasion was taking place, we knew what the U.S. president has to say. We know, but who's going to represent Europe? Is it president of France or a chancellor of Germany, or is it a president of a commission, which is not an elected person, right? So it's still, we're not a united continent. And the question, and I would go back to the comments made by the former European Central Bank governor Mario Draghi, who was in his speech last week was very, I think, put things in a real perspective. If Europe wants to be a real power, we need to be talking about a kind of more federalizing of Europe. And then when you ask this, the second question would come, all right, what are we as Lithuanians, the Poles, Hungarians, the French, the Swedes are willing to give up in terms of our sovereignty, in terms of our national identity, to become really a United States of Europe, a continent, essentially a state like America, like United States of America, that's able to wield that military and political influence. And I'm not sure we have those answers, to be honest. We're too divided. In each nation, we have, again, even more division, whether it's nationalistic elements kind of rising up, the populist movements are in every country. So Europe is divided, and because we're not a united continent, that will have an impact on our technological and economic and other viabilities.
Giedrimas, do you think that because Europe is a very divided continent, that could be actually the biggest threat for NATO?
I would not perhaps put it that way. I think it's a threat for Europe, European Union as a supranational institution. That's the threat. For NATO, and I think that's the beauty of NATO, is because we have Canada, we have United States. That's the main, and that's why we need America. That's why we need America in Europe, and America needs Europe, by the way, as well. We're connected at the hip, as I say, and I think it's for NATO. I think we're the decision making, the presence of the United States president at those meetings, the investments that America is making is absolutely essential for us, and we need to catch up. We need to do our own part, and we haven't been doing that for many decades. So I think it's up to us to look at ourselves in a mirror as Europeans and to see what we need to do to maintain that NATO remains that core institution of the future architecture of the world.
Okay, so it's good that you've mentioned U.S. president, because my next question is just about the U.S. So how would you assess the role of the United States today?
Well, I think we have a United States president that makes statements and sort of leads decisions that are not really conventional, perhaps in a kind of diplomatic, geopolitical element. But we do have a president that's decisive. And that's, that has obviously, as a United States president, he has a lot of responsibilities, and his agenda is super busy. And of course, we all would love for him to focus on the Suwalki Gap, or on Ukraine,
sure,
or on Estonia, or Poland. But that's, United States is a global power. Now, what we're seeing is, and I've mentioned that before, is that because Donald Trump has finally forced Europeans to pay for defense, up to 5% of GDP. That's what we're becoming stronger. So I think his decisions,
still not everyone pays those 5%.
Not everyone, and of course there's a timeline that that the countries need to get there to that number. But again, that's I think 2035, and obviously the different countries will get there if they get there.
Wouldn't it be too late in 2035?
I think it is too late, but I also think that because of the sort of personality of the United States president and his leadership style, I think these things can move even faster. Now, we've seen in a past probably month where President Trump was very clear that the United States defense budget needs to go not from $1 trillion to perhaps $1.5 trillion per year.
That's a lot.
Now, I would say that if that happens, and that 500 billion per year addition, that's total of the rest of the NATO, by the way, spending per year. So if they add that kind of number, I think the pressure will be built up on other NATO member states to go also maybe to 7%, maybe to 8%. But if we need to do that, because that's the price of freedom. And I think even 5%, the challenge with Europe is that we're investing it on an individual country basis. There are very, very few joint acquisitions. There are very, very few kind of combined multinational, procurement deals. And we're still doing things from a very national defense industry's perspective in Europe. And that's, $1 trillion in U.S. versus $1 trillion in Europe yields a very different capability, because as among the 35 or 40 countries, you split that trillion, the outcomes are very, very different. There's too many bureaucracies, too many procurement deals. In the U.S., it's a more singular system. So again, we need to understand that the threat is out there. The threat is not going to go away, no matter how the kind of things even out in Ukraine or not. I think we need to invest, and I think we should be thankful to President Trump for his leadership in really forcing Europeans to think with our heads.
Okay, my last question. So if you had to name one concrete reform NATO must implement in the next 2-3 years to remain credible, what would it be and why? Briefly.
I think, first of all, we've been talking about the adaptation of new technologies, new emerging technologies into the militaries. I think we need to do it at a much larger scale and at a much greater speed. Things are changing on the battlefield in Ukraine. We see a lot of things, coming out of there. We need to integrate that into national militaries, and NATO, as an organizer, as a central organization, it needs to do a lot more in that.
Well, all I can say is just let's not wait till 2035.
Should be now. Should be now. We should be thinking how we're going to fight now. This should be the question. I think every military chief of defense in every country should be thinking, okay, what if the war comes tomorrow? What do I do? And I think that's the mentality we need to get to.
Thank you for joining us today, and I really hope to see you once again in our studio.
Thank you.
And I would like to remind our viewers that our guest for today was Giedrimas Jeglinskas, Lithuanian MP and former NATO official. You're watching TVP World. Stay with us.